Hello everybody, welcome back. Today in the workshop we have one that I've been working on for a little while now. It was collected about 4 years ago and wasn't really a branch on it at the time. And this is a Pyracantha or a firethorn. I don't know the exact cultivar, but I wanted to bring this one in to the workshop and show it to you. This is one that I've been doing some work on for the past few years now, utilizing the same techniques as I've been using on all of my trees. And this one I actually let flower this year, and it does have berries, and I want to let the berries set on it as well. And one of the reasons I'm going to do that is for the past few years I've removed the berries off of this tree, and in turn it took all the energy that it was putting towards berry production into growth. And I've got the basic outline that I'm satisfied with on this tree, with the exception of a few small areas. So I'm trying to slow the growth down on this tree now. And one of the ways of doing that would be obviously to let the berries set. Plus in the wintertime they're going to be a nice fiery orange color. And it's going to be very appealing in the winter when there's really nothing much else going on in the winter. I'll do a quick 360 for you here. There's some other work that I'm going to need to do to the tree today. As you can see, I've got some sacrifice branches I was letting grow down here that we're going to talk about here in a moment. This is an evergreen tree. It'll always have foliage on it. So there are some things I was able to do to hide some flaws on the tree. When I originally acquired this tree, it was really giant. Of course I had to do the trunk chop and everything. It's got a really large scar in the back. But like I said, it is an evergreen tree, so I'm able to hide a lot of that with, branching. So I'm letting branches grow over that area where that is, and that's going to hide that. And it is starting to callus over, and eventually it will be completely calloused over. Maybe not in my lifetime. These things are really slow to heal over, but nonetheless, that's kind of where we are. This whole top that you see right here used to be a straight branch. I actually, when it was younger, bent it this way and let it grow up. And when it got to about the size of your index finger, I wired it over this way again, let it grow some more. It set into position and I removed the top, and then it back butted. You can see I do have a guy wire right here. It was a little bit more upright than I had liked, so I had to put a guy wire on here to bring everything down into position. I'm going to actually be removing this guy wire today as well. So let's go ahead and get started on this tree. Like I said before, this is a collected urban Yamadori. I collected it out of a hedge that was planted in a park back in 1959. So this tree is considerably old. I can't imagine that the tree was brand spanking new seedling back in 1959. But what had happened was, I can only assume it was a drunk driver, ran over the hedgerow that this tree was planted in, and basically took out the entire side. And as a consequence, they were digging these trees up, and I happened to be lucky enough to drive by at the time they were digging them up. And I asked the foreman there, I said, hey, what are you guys doing with those? And he said, we're replacing the hedgerow. Somebody ran it over. We don't know who it is, don't know who did it. But, half of it's destroyed, the other half's fine. But unfortunately, we can't find trees to replace the other half that are going to be of the same size. It's going to look weird, so we're just ripping it all out and planting it all over again. So I said, well, do you mind if I poke around in the trees that you've already ripped out of the ground, and if there's one I would be interested in, would you mind if I had it? And he said, no, by all means, have it. And this is the one I chose. About 99% of them, there was one other one other than this one that had a single trunk on it, but it was about half the size of this one, and it had a really bad scar on the trunk where they just wrapped a chain around it and pulled it out with a backhoe. This one's actually still in the ground as they were digging them out, and I was actually able to borrow a shovel from one of the guys and dig it out myself. They thought I was nuts that I wanted to have this tree, and I was so excited about this tree, but not everybody does bonsai, so not everybody would understand. But it has got an immense trunk on it for a Pyracantha. I haven't seen many Pyracantha with big trunks like this that aren't wildly overgrown. This one was pretty compact for for the size of the trunk that this tree has, because it was a hedge and because it was pruned on a regular basis. Now, what I wanted to discuss here real quick with you is these two sacrifice branches that I have growing on this side of the tree here. I actually have this right here, which is not a sacrifice branch, and we're going to go ahead and remove that so you can see the ones that I'm referring to right now. This is just actually a branch that's is going to be needed, but I just kind of let it grow long because it was in the way of where the wire was. And let's see what am I going to do here with this bad boy. Just going to take this off right here. Take that off right there. If I was to remove that entire area of branching right there, you would see the scar. Of course, that's not very attractive, so we don't want to remove too much of it. We'll develop this as we go. So initially this was all one main branch that came up after I had chopped it, and then like I said before, I did the bending and everything. When I did the initial cut back over here on this side, and you'll see that here in a minute, we'll zoom in on it, I did get a flush of back bedding, which I was happy with. Just didn't go where I wanted it to be. So I let this grow up on this direction, and then when I cut it back, I got another flush of back bedding, and it was decent, not necessarily where I wanted it to be again. But I need to figure out an overall shape for this particular tree. And as you can see, right now, what we have is satisfactory. It's got a nice, without these branches altogether, it's a nice outline. This would be number one branch here. You know, over here we've got secondary branches and tertiary branches in the top. To me, it reminded me, with the way the tree looks now, minus these sacrifice branches, to me it looked like a big old tree that you'd see out in the African safari, where the giraffes and the elephants and everything ate up all the bottom to the point where their necks and their trunks would no longer reach. And that's the design that it had. Unfortunately, on this side over here is where the trunk chop was, so I was not able to, or I would be able to, but I didn't want to recreate that type of situation because of where the trunk chop was. So I needed to try to add some branching over here and try to make a main branch down here, so that this over here is actually going to be a secondary branch, not the main branch. Okay, and so that's why I have these couple sacrifice branches growing on the other side here. The more and more I work with this tree, and the slower and slower growth that it's getting, I don't know that we're going to be able to realistically do it in a reasonable time frame. So that's why I wanted to work on this tree today. I wanted to see what my options are and potentially remove and or restyle a few bits of this tree. Now, I like that the main bend of the trunk is this direction, so the weight of the tree is this direction. That's really nice, and I do like that a lot. I also think balance-wise, it's nice. What you cannot see is the trunk actually does a curve this way, and then my new leader that grew out this way, and then I've bent it back this way, and then back that way again, so the tree actually has a really nice movement all the way throughout it. And so I really think that the overall look of the tree, as you see it now, is pretty well balanced, and I do like it. It's a little light in this area over here, and with time and with pruning, these branches here that you see, I mean, all these branches here that you see are really young branches. There was nothing over here when I started. There's three main branches right here, and that's these three right here, and every single one of these is smaller than a pencil right now. Within the last year, these three branches have grown to kind of cover this area. I had these last year back bud, so I've got three more branches here that have back budded. And of these three branches, this one here is the sacrifice branch that I'm trying to attempt to grow longer so I can pull it over and down this direction to kind of fill in this void. So if you look at it now, I'm trying to bring this over and down like so to fill in that void. This one down here, it just kind of grew last season. I just left it alone. I didn't really do much to this tree. I was focusing on other trees. This is not necessary, so we're going to go ahead and just remove it. This tree at first did not back bud at all. Once the roots got established into the pot is when it started putting off back budding. So if you end up collecting one of these from a hedgerow, the first season don't expect much out of it. It's not going to do, it'll sulk, basically. Is what this thing did, was sulk. The year after that, I did get some back budding, and that's when it started. That's when I chose the main leader for the tree and allowed it to grow freely for a growing season and fertilized the heck out of it. The second growing season, the same thing occurred. I did a main chop on it and let it grow. My cut sites I kind of left alone because I needed them for guy wiring purposes. Now that everything up top here is in its respective position, I wanted to today remove the cut site so that we can focus on the healing process. Of the tree. That's all the farther I want to take that back. Like I said before, these things do take a long time to heal the wounds, so you kind of want to think about that as well. Now I do have some branches like you saw. This branch actually here is coming from underneath here. It's coming up and over. Not really the best thing. It should be down here, down and over here where it belongs. I guess we can just go ahead and do that now. And down here is where it belongs, but of course it's growing straight up. That's not good for bonsai, and I just broke it anyway. We're just going to remove it. It's not really serving much of a purpose. It was kind of hiding this area in here, but I need to start developing the proper branches to put in place. Even though this is a deciduous tree, and yeah, you can do some tricks and things like that to kind of hide these areas. I don't want to do that. I'm going to actually take one of these branches here and move them over into position to take care of that area, or maybe even this bottom one. Move this bottom one over to here to kind of take care of that area of the tree. It will get more dense with time, of course, and more pruning. I want to keep the top of this thing pruned back as much as possible and work on ramification. This little branch here doesn't really have any business being in here, so let's go ahead and remove all those. Anything that's growing down low, like this stuff here that just kind of sprouts out from time to time, really is doing nothing but taking energy away from the areas that you're wanting to grow. So just make sure you keep all that stuff cleaned off of the trunk, because unnecessary energy, wasted energy, is less development that you're going to have on your tree for that growing season. So we're just going to kind of go through this tree today and figure out what we need, what we don't need, what we want to keep, what we don't want to keep, and get it more in line towards the final design of the tree and the final outline of the tree. Now, the reason that I've left this lower branch on here, the lowest one that you see, is another kind of conundrum that I have is this branch here that I'm growing as a potential low branch is actually higher on the tree than this branch is. So, I mean, this branch is the thickest branch. Everything tells me that should be the #1 branch. It's more than likely going to be #1 branch in the final design. I was just wanting something else over here to be the #1 branch a little lower, because that's going to give, this is an outside bend, of course, and you know, outside bends is where you want your branching to be in the scope of a tree. I just thought that this, if this branch was to be able to grow to be the lowest #1 branch on the tree, it's going to make the tree look a little thicker, a little fuller, a little larger, a little more ancient. It's going to make the base of the trunk more significant than what it is now. And so that's kind of why I've tried to develop this branch. I still am probably going to do that. This one right here doesn't necessarily need to be any longer. What I want to do with this branch here is focus the energy back up into this area here. We've got this branch that's growing out here, and we've got a branch now that has come out right here at the base of where this branch has come out, and I want to kind of develop those more. So by trimming this off, I'm going to push the energy back up into these branches here, which is going to fill in this void here, which is going to cover the scar. And in the back here, I've kind of trimmed a hole for that reason as well. I wanted as much light to penetrate in here as I could, so I could get energy into this part, so I could get some back budding in here, so I could do that. And it's happened successfully. So let's go ahead and start thinning this thing out and see what we can come up with. Of course, this tree is well off from being a finished tree. In no way, shape, or form is this tree anywhere close to being finished. But these things are necessary. I probably should have done these a little earlier, but I wanted to go ahead and let it flower. Like for instance, this branch right here is way too long for where it belongs, but it was covering up the scar. But now we can go ahead and shorten it up a little bit to let more light into that back budded area that I've gotten, so it can fill out, because it's a significant part of the plant. I mean, right back in here, all this needs to fill out. And the only way to do that is to allow it to get light.